adjoining property owners. Did that ever happen?
It has not been offered to the adjoining property owners yet, but it could be, and it's certainly still available for adjacent property owners. It is larger than would typically be offered, but it certainly could be, as long as they were able to abide by the easement requirements.
Okay. Can we find out, because Paul was last working on this, and again, you don't have to answer this now, but can we find out if that letter ever did go out, and if not, if we can ensure to send that out, obviously, with this new information? Because I believe there's still interest in adjoining it with the parcel, their particular parcel.
Do you know which of the adjacent parcels we're talking about, council member?
If you're looking at it on the East Main side, the ones at the left.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you.
I don't know the number.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Need a motion?
So moved.
Need a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Introductory number 323, authorizing a lease agreement for the Southeast Neighborhood Service Center. Questions, comments, concerns? Councilmember Spall.
I'm good. Thank you. I mean, I know it's, he started. It's temporary. I mean, it's until we make the final move, and I think that the Stearns have been good to us, and we're going to stay there as long as we are getting ready to move to another location. Right, Mayor?
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Item carries. Introductory number 324, authorizing the funding and agreements for the Northwest Quadrant Historic Resource Survey. Questions, comments, concerns? Councilmember Gruber.
Yes, thank you for the full response. I see in the answers it says that one of the most important outcomes of the project will be the identification of properties and neighborhoods that are potentially eligible for rehab tax credits and listing in the National Register of Historic Places. I guess I'm just wondering, once this list is created, does the Landmark Society take the lead in helping to facilitate any type of applications, or is that something the city does in conjunction with them? How does that process work?
Mitch Rose here from Landmark. I think he can best answer that question.
Great, thanks, Mitch.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be back in the building. So in response to the question about National Register of Historic Places, in most instances, the Historic Resource Survey sets the table, if you will, in identifying those properties that are potentially eligible. We do offer at the Landmark Society in our portfolio of services that we offer writing those nominations and assisting with the historic tax credits. There are principally two benefits from being on the National Register. First is the recognition and the honor of being recognized as being nationally significant. The other is the historic tax credits, which are eligible to both residential and commercial properties. The benefits are more substantial for commercial properties, 20% federal, 20% state. But residential property owners are also eligible. You have a process you have to go through. You have to file with the State Historic Preservation Office, outline your work. There are some requirements that have to be met. There's nothing that precludes a property owner from making their own nomination. There are also other organizations, Barrow Architecture locally and other firms who assist homeowners with those nominations. And it is I wouldn't call it an arduous process, but it does take some time. It requires both a state and federal agency hearing and referral, and usually takes about a year to get through that process.
Let's say during the course of this study, the Landmark Society identifies a street or a section that this would be a really good thing to apply for. Are you just identifying, or are you also afterwards kind of pushing and trying to facilitate the application process?
Both. In the one that came out of the southeast quadrant, which was the first of the 4 city quadrants undertaken in this effort, resulted in the proposed Park Avenue Historic District, and the Landmark Society wrote to the Preservation League of New York State and actually secured a grant. I don't want to tell you the exact amount. I think it was about $15,000, and there's a private fundraising effort underway now with homeowners and other stakeholders to raise the match. So that's one specific effort that has come out of that quadrant's effort, which was year one of what's turned out to be a 4-year effort. And we met with Director Kirkmeyer and his staff to talk about how we would finish this process into the next city fiscal year. And then the local item of significance would be an update to the DHB list, the designated buildings of historic value, for which there are about 6,000, and that comes up when there's a potential demolition in particular. And I think having earlier in my career administered that code, I think that list should be updated, and those sections of the zoning code that regulate the DBHB list are due for an update. So that'd be one of the other things that will come out of completing this effort.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Thank you.
Seeing none, need a motion and a second.
So move. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Introductory number 325, amending ordinance number 2018-181, authorizing a loan agreement for the 49 Stone Street redevelopment project. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, need a motion and a second.
Motion to adopt. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item carries. Introductory number 341, authorizing the sale of the Mortimer Street Garage. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, what do we need? We need a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Introductory number 342, authorizing the sale of the East End Garage. So, let the conversation begin. But before we begin, okay. So let's see, what do we have here? The sale of the East End parking garage. I know there are a lot of questions on this item, and before we begin questions, I want to state for the record that at the conclusion of the council members' questions, I will be asking for a motion to consider on this item. This is not an endorsement of this legislation. Question? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll just keep going. Okay, this is not an endorsement of this legislation by the voting members of this committee, if y'all choose not to, if folks really don't feel it, but rather allows for the full council on Tuesday to vote on the item and not simply hold it in committee. With that being said, who wants to start? You have no questions.
I have a question.
So,
Okay.
Somewhere in the material that we received, it said that the city had
Yeah,
no
okay.
prior involvement with
Get it all, yeah.
one of the principals in this agreement, but there was an extensive interaction around a parcel in the Winton Village area, the parking lot. And I think there also was a significant issue about a property that he owns on Park Avenue. I recall that the conversations about that parking lot were ongoing and quite contentious, but in the material that we provided, it said that we had no prior involvement with him, and I'm wondering how that happened.
Council President, I can perhaps attempt to explain that to you, but as we looked at this, we have not had any recent interactions with Dr. Elstein, who is, I believe, the person in question. He did own a parking lot at 902 Merchants. He has not owned that parking lot since 2016. And as we went through the team that worked on this, none of the people on the team had been involved in any interactions with him. So to the best of our knowledge, at that point in time, we did not know of any interaction that we had had with him. We understand now, after doing a little more digging, that there were some interactions with him regarding the 902 Merchants parking lot. My understanding is that he is a minority investor in this and will not have any operational control of the garage. The operational control rests with an actual parking organization. The developer of this garage, Mr. Masacci, is here if you'd like further details on the doctor's interactions with the actual operation of the garage should it be sold. But in terms of our previous interactions, we were unaware of any work with Dr. Elstein.
Yeah, so with the I understand we have a reverter. We would have a reverter clause as far as the operation of the garage, so that concerns about lack of maintenance would be found, or it could come back to the city if we were not satisfied. Is that right?
In all of the garages, it would be our intent to put in the contract that we would be doing inspections once yearly, and that if we found that they were not up to our city code and in compliance with our agreement, that the city would be able to get that property back and it would revert back to the city.
What kind of process is that in terms of the annual inspection, and if conditions are found not to be satisfactory and you indicate that repairs are needed or maintenance is needed, and they say, okay, all right, I'll handle it, I got it. So what is that process? How does that extend? How does that get done? Or do we just wait and wait?
So we're under obligation, like with elevator inspections and other things, to make sure that they are up to par. And so we actually will hire a engineering company to go out to inspect, to note, like we do with code enforcement. We would give the person a specific time to actually rectify the repair, and if they did not, then they would be under fine and ultimately would be in jeopardy of losing the property.
And back to the condition of one of the principals, there was back taxes, but not on, it was on another corporation or something that this person's a principal in. And I understand that concept, but when a resident owes taxes, we don't sell them additional property, do we? When they want to buy,
they're purchasing that property in their name. So, so when you do a search, if you're searching for, say, John Doe, and the John Doe is purchasing the property in their name, then we would do a search for their name to see if they currently own and owe city taxes or code enforcement or anything like that. If you did a search for 475 East Main Street LLC, then you would not see that they owe us anything or there is a transaction with this particular company with the city of Rochester. When you go down and you look at the principals and you individualize the principals and what their obligation is to the city, you would then see that. But again, when they put it in a computer to look to see if there is if this particular entity owes the city taxes, this entity does not owe the city taxes. If you were to search individually, then it would be different. But so I guess that's what we look at, and whoever did the original search, that's what they were looking for, the entity. Then there became questions asked to the principals, and we had to go back and do further research and look at that.
So once it's determined that one of the principals is delinquent in taxes, even though it's a separate corporation, but he's a principal in the one that's attempting to make this purchase, is that acceptable? When is it not acceptable, when someone is delinquent or not a good actor, although they're involved in another organization?
Based on our city code and based on what we currently have, what's currently in law is the entity that's purchasing the property. And so we would need to change the law and change how we actually, we would need to change the law to say that any corporation that has a principal partner that is looking to purchase property from the city, that everyone has to be in compliance. At this point in time, that's not the way that it reads. And therefore, that's not the way that we enforce it. I mean, if that's something that City Council wants us to take a look at in the future, we definitely will. But on this particular transaction, that law or those requirements would be something that we would do in the future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spall.
Well, let me just clarify the pain and agony that we went through with Dr. Elstein. And when we met in work session, I told you all, go check this out. And I thought you all did. And because Kathy Sheets is retired and Bob Zimmer may have retired, it doesn't mean there aren't people who had memories of that. And Councilmember McFadden's aide actually pulled out some records. So I'm having a hard time hearing. I wasn't going to say anything, but I told you all this was a problem. It was my first almost 8 years on council, and thank you to some people in NBD who then did find the information. Look, people make mistakes, and it was a very, very difficult, contentious dealings. And so I'm raising questions, and I raised them at the very work session we had. Dana, Tim, I mean, I told you then, go check this out. So when a parking lot owner, and it's not a big parking lot, it's a small lot, city had an assessment, his behavior was so bad that the city didn't want to go forth with a contract, and one of our neighborhood businesses took on that assessment, Johnny's Pub, so John Savino did it. So it's shocking, actually shocking to me that we're sitting here saying you didn't know this, because you did know this, and whether the deal goes forward or not is a different story. Other people may not want to vote yes or no, but I think to say that we didn't know there was dealings is not accurate. And Mayor Warren, I think you have not been informed. Maybe I probably should have texted you directly, and maybe I'll do that next time, because I think you should have known that at least, and then made a decision. And it might have been to go forward, and that would have been okay. But when council gets something, our question comes back saying, we've never had dealings with him, when we hate 8 years of dealings and a lease agreement under the city's name, I find that like not due diligence. So it's troubling to me. Now, again, it may be that we decide it was history and we want to go forward. I'm just counting on accurate information to questions.
So I apologize to you, Councilmember Spa, for anyone that was on our administration that misspoke and said that they had no dealings or they didn't have any recollection, because you do have a turnover in staff. After it was researched and after you raised the question, I believe they went back and they researched, and then they did find that there was some concerns back in the property had been disposed of back in 2016. Again, when you look at this, you look at the entity, which is 475 East Main Street, LLC. You're not looking at the individual partners within that entity, and I think that may be what our team was looking at when they answered your question. And then when it was, no, I want to look at the individual people that are part of the transaction, then that is when the issue was raised. The parking structure, the offer is $1.3 million over what we were asking for it. It was also, I believe, $1.3 million over the second bidder in this in this parcel, and the entities, they have property located right next to or adjacent to or across the street from the East End parking garage, and it is a cash transaction. So when we looked at it, we looked at the fact that we would have a reverter clause, and that if the entities are not complying with what city's code and regulations would be, that the city would be able to revert. We looked at the fact that we would be going in yearly and doing engineers inspections to make sure that the public is kept safely, and we also looked at our own costs when it comes down to the ongoing maintenance and upkeep and the capital cost to the garage. And we decided that based on the fact that it was $1.3 million over what we were asking, that the property owners had property that's adjacent to this. It would be, we're trying to rebuild, build up downtown, and we know they're trying to get residents to live in their building, and also commercial people that, and given all of the requirements that we would have with it, that it would be something that we would go forward with and put to council at this time.
No, I appreciate that. And you know, nobody intentionally didn't tell the truth. I'm not saying that. I think for me, again, when you have a big public, and it's a garage that is used by multiple stakeholders, and most of the stakeholders, according to the answers, have not been even informed or talked to, although I think there may have been an interest in doing that, and it didn't happen. So I'm worried more about the maintenance part of it when you have one of the partners who did not maintain even a small parking garage. So that's all. I mean, I think it's important that we're able to speak clearly. I hear what you're saying. Listen, I'm sort of on the same page in terms of selling as many of them as we can. I think this is just maybe the time for this one isn't right. That's just my opinion. And, I've spent many years dealing with stakeholders and having lots and lots and lots of headaches around that garage and who could use it and who couldn't. So I may have a different perspective, and that's probably going to be my perspective. But I appreciate all of you, trying your best, and I'm not angry. I just think that we count on accurate information. I appreciate your apology, Mayor. It's not, you didn't give me the misinformation. If I had called you probably would have remembered maybe even what we went through because we were on council together. So that's all. I mean, I'm grateful to be able to speak out, and I think it's important to clear the air. Personally, I'd rather not sell the garage at this time, but I think the offer is a good offer. There's no question about that. And garages are very expensive, and we got to face that at some point anyway. So I appreciate that. That's all. So thank you.
And I'll just note that the garage operator or the owner would be purchasing the garage contingent upon complying with the parking agreements that we already have there. So, and entities such as the Eastman School of Music or YMCA, we have a contract with them. And if you remember, I was on the Cultural Commission who originally owned the garage many years ago, and we sold it back to the city.
Right.
And in that sale, there were a number of agreements that were there, and we complied with that. And so we would make sure that the garage owners would be in compliance with that as well. The agreements for the YMCA, Eastman School of Music, or any other businesses. I believe the Sagamore has a contract.
Right.
Citizens Bank, I believe, has a contract
Right.
there.
Right.
So they would be purchasing it contingent upon that. They would be purchasing it contingent upon the fact that they could not increase the rates until 2019. They would be purchasing it knowing that the city would be doing yearly inspections, and I'm not sure if on this lot on Winton Road that the city did yearly inspections to make sure that they were compliant and doing what they were supposed to do. And if they don't, then they would be suffering that the property would revert back to the city with many contingencies within that. Given the fact that it is a cash deal, given the fact that this was not only public, there were several newspaper articles that were published. We sent out the RFP to 125 different parking garage developers as well as operators. We got 3 responses back. We also put it out on our website as well. And so, we did our due diligence as it pertains to making sure that the public was very informed. This was not something that was done in the dark. It was something that was very public. We put out 3 RFPs for the garages at the same time. We got 3 proposals on each one. We had a weight structure and weighing. Do people have buildings that's contingent upon the garage being operated by this entity? The price, of course, was very, very important, but also making sure that the success of the city and the capital costs that our taxpayers are currently paying on many of these garages that we can't continue to. We're not in a position, and we will do what we have to do to make sure that they're safe. But it's better for us to allow for a private entity to own these particular garages, given those contingencies that we have and protections that we have. We believe that was best to go forward.
Yeah, thank you.
So it was mentioned a couple of times in terms of outreach to current stakeholders and maybe neighboring businesses. Can we just talk a little bit more specifically about what that outreach looks like? You know, places like Rochester Contemporary or the Rochester, I don't know what we call it anymore, Rochester Club, or the place right next door that does weddings and what have you. And you said Citizens in Sagamore. Are all of these individuals on board? If we were to ask them, would they say, we're comfortable and we're feeling good about this? How would we characterize that interaction at this moment?
I'm not sure that they would all be on board with the selling of the garage, but it's all contingent upon the person that's buying it. Is contingent upon them to accept the agreements that we currently have. In many cases, you know, with the YMCA, I mean, I think that agreement is for years that they would have to comply with that. So it would be operated as a public garage, but it gives a developer the ability to be able to market their business a little bit different in downtown Rochester, when they can say that we can offer you parking at this rate if you come to this building. And we recognize that that is one of the things that many of the developers looked at when bidding on these garages, and that's why we took into consideration developers who had buildings that were attached or very, very close to the garages that we were selling.
Okay. And how would events like Jazz Fest and what have you be handled? Same or
all of the
how does
parking,
that transition?
All of the parking garages will remain public parking garages. I'm pretty sure that they, and many of the garages, and all of them, we already have parking agreements with all of these entities. And so the goal for many of these developers is to be able to market their building, market their asset, you know, to have people to utilize it. I don't think that there is anyone that would buy a parking garage to keep it solely for themselves. They have to pay capital costs, they have to pay operating costs and all those other things. So the notion that they would close the gate and only allow certain people to use it, I think is absurd.
Okay.
Council members, Paul?
I just want a follow-up question. Do we know if the lease agreements we have have an assignment clause without notification? I mean, that's one of the things. So I think that the lease agreements we have with the Y or the RPO or ROCO or anybody or stakeholders like that is probably solid with an assignment. We can sell it, right? Does anybody check that?
We would sell the garages contingent upon our lease agreements, the same way that we did with Midtown.
Okay.
When we did the Midtown garage, we sold it. We had a number of parking agreements there with, at the time, with Pike Construction.
Right.
And Windstream. So we would sell the garage contingent upon the agreements that we currently have and keeping those in place and complying with that.
Yeah.
And
I'm
that's
just
what they would
thinking,
agree to.
You know, to be fair to the developer, why would we not take the time to talk to the Y or the RPO or anybody who had a lease agreement with us? Just because I haven't seen the lease agreements, but they probably have an assignment clause with notice. I'm sure we can assign our ownership over. I mean, that would be, if we didn't have that, I would worry about our legal department, so I think we're good. But it probably has a notice agreement as well, a notice period as well, so it's assignment with notice. So why would we not reach out and say, just so you know, we have an agreement with you, it's going to be solid, we're all good? I mean, why would we not just take that extra step, knowing there's so many, this is an unusual place because it's so public and there's so many small, and we've got a lot of really good solid lease agreements. Why would we not sort of clean that up?
So our obligation is to notify them after the fact, just as if you were buying if a mortgage company was buying your mortgage, they would tell you after the fact that, by the way, I purchased your mortgage. Yeah. But the agreements, nothing changes for any of these entities. Nothing changes for them because the agreements in place are the agreements in place. Yeah. So they still would pay the same, whether the city owned it or another entity owned it. Right. It doesn't change for them. Right. It's just that they would no longer be paying the city. If they were paying a lump sum to the city, then you're not paying us anymore. You're paying this person or this operator or their operator. Yeah. So our notice to them would because nothing changes for them.
Would be after, okay. But we would then notice. Sometimes I just think we err on the side of goodwill by having that kind of conversation, but that's just me. So, okay, thanks.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments? Councilmember McFadden, Councilmember Gruber? Okay. At this time, I need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Introductory number 343, authorizing a long-term capital lease agreement for the Genesee Crossroads Garage. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to ask that Councilmember Lightfoot, would you want to be included in the vote for introductory number 319?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes the business of the Neighborhood and Business Development Committee.
And I'm going to move us right into Parks and Public Works Committee and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Evans, Councilmember Gruber. Here. Councilmember Spall.
Here.
Vice President McFadden. Here. President Scott.
Here.
Introductory number 326, authorizing an amendatory agreement for the 2017 Preventive Maintenance Contract Number 4 project. Questions, concerns? If not, can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I say aye. Motion passes. Introductory number 327, bond ordinance of the City of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $400,000 bonds of said city to finance the reconstruction of certain portions of Cleveland Street, Draper Street, Central Park, Merchants Road, and Browncroft Boulevard, related to the 2017 Preventive Maintenance Contract Number 4 project. Questions? Comments? Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I say aye, motion passes. Introductory number 328, authorizing reimbursement agreement for area way improvements at 1 South Clinton Avenue. Questions, concerns? If not, a motion and a second?
Let's move it.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and I say aye, motion passes. Introductory number 329, authorizing an amendatory agreement for the Rundell Library Structural Terrace Improvement Phase 4 project. So exciting. Any questions, concerns?
Moved.
Thank you. Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I say aye, motion passes. Introductory number 330, authorizing agreements for a transitional job training and placement program. Questions or concerns? A motion?
Moved.
And second, moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I say aye, motion passes. Introductory number 331, authorizing reimbursement agreement for abandonment of area way at 49 Stone Street. Questions, concerns? Motion?
Moved.
Can I have a
Second.
second? Moved in second. All in favor?
Oh, I have to abstain.
Oh, and one
Pardon.
abstention, so it's,
You need another motion.
oh, we can't make a motion. Moved? Can I get a second? Loretta?
Ruth?
Can you second it?
Did she call me Ruth?
I called you Loretta, sorry. Is your name? I'm sorry, I mean, President Scott, I'm sorry.
I thought you called me Ruth.
No, I know your name. I need, Councilmember Gruber can't help us here, so can you get a second? Okay,
Second.
moved in second, all in favor, and one abstention. Motion passes. If there's no further work to come before this committee, we are adjourned. We're good. Go ahead. Well, you can go. Yeah. You got time? Making good time?
All right, at this time, I'd like to call to order the Public Safety, Youth, and Recreation Committee. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Present.
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz, Vice President McFadden,
Here.
President Scott.
Let the record reflect that we are also joined by the rest of our members of council, with the exception of Councilmember Clifford and Evers. Introduction number 332, appropriating funds and authorizing an agreement to support community programs. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Oh, yeah.
Moved.
Big no.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 333, amending ordinance numbers 2017-309 and 2018-22 to extend animal population control program. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 334, authorizing agreement with the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for Tactical Team Program Grant. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 335, authorizing a grant agreement with the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for Critical Infrastructure Grant Program. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introductory number 336, amending 2018-19 budget for after-school programming. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 337, authorizing an agreement and amending the budget for the Concrete to Canvas project. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
Moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introductory number 338, authorizing a grant agreement and funding for the Child Passenger Safety Program. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 339, amending the 2018-19 budget for the reimbursement of overtime costs and other expenses related to electronic crime investigations. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introductory number 340, authorizing agreement and amending the budget related to the Rochester Urban Skate Park. Any questions? Council Member Ortiz.
So can you just briefly walk us through, because I had conversations over the weekend or last weekend with members of the South Wedge community, and there was a little bit of confusion in terms of, I guess, decision making here. And so I'm just trying to, if we could get a little bit of a timeline and on this, that would be great, because the location did flip-flop many times, and then I guess it came back to, I'm going to say original location, I'm not sure. But the neighbors in the South Wedge are saying that they didn't know that this finally was selected as, again, the final location, I guess. And they felt like there was perhaps not enough opportunity for input into this whole situation. And I know people are super excited about this, so I don't want to, put on the brakes or any of that kind of stuff, because we've been waiting a long time for this thing. So, but in the fact that now we're finally moving quickly, can you talk about what the opportunity will be to bring in those neighbors from the Southwest that don't feel like they were brought in before? I don't know.
The skate park project was part of the Rochester Riverway project, which had over 30 community meetings. It was maybe even probably more than that. This was one of the projects that was heavily advocated for during the Rochester Riverway discussion. And so that period was from the time the governor announced it to June, I believe, till he came back to announce the final projects. And so we encouraged and reached out to many neighbors across the city. They had many public meetings to talk specifically about all of those Rochester Riverway projects. And this was one of those projects and that received funding in this particular location. Right. So the need to move expeditiously has to do with the funding source. the money is finally here. They also received a grant from the Wilson Foundation, but there were many community meetings talking about this project and other projects along the Riverway, and this was one of them.
Right. So I was a little taken back by their questions and statements on here, but did we, again, and maybe we did, for all of those meetings, and again, from the individuals I was speaking to, they didn't realize, I don't know how, but that the whole conversations with Rock the Riverway, that this was for sure a done deal. And so is there, I guess, moving forward, because again, I don't want to stop it, but is there an opportunity for NBN6 and SEEK and those kinds of groups to be specifically brought in for, I don't know what opportunities there are anymore for input and what have you, but an opportunity for them to just partake in this?
We'll have I believe that there'll be a public meeting around the design of the park, and
Okay.
We can make sure that we, through our neighborhood service center, reach out to them during this process. But the Rock the Riverway team went to different community meetings. They asked, they had different meetings in different neighborhoods. I'm pretty sure they had a meeting there. And so if they didn't know about it, then, we'll
Yeah, I don't
continue
know.
to, aside from calling someone up and, knocking on their door and dragging them to the meeting.
Right,
I think
I
that
gotcha.
we tried to do a good job of notifying people when we were actually having these meetings and what we were discussing at each of these meetings. And but we'll make sure that we, I think that through the design period, there has to be a number of public meetings.
Okay.
And so until it's actually built, there'll be opportunities for public comment and input.
Okay. When we have that timeline, can we be provided what that timeline looks like, so then we can also maybe help with making sure we're doing that reach out, so that less and less people have the opportunity to say those things to us?
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
I just want to say kudos. This has been, I've been talking to people about this for 10 years, probably. It's been a long time coming. Mayor Warren, a lot of credit to you and Commissioner Lyman Torres for moving it fast, and thanks to Jim and Eric and the whole team for getting this going. Really exciting stuff.
Everybody good? All right. Need a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Introduction number 346, authorizing agreement for the Teenage Pregnancy Prevention Program. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Need a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. There's no further business to come before the Public Safety Youth Recreation Committee. The committee is adjourned.
And it looks like it is exactly 4:50. So I'm going to call the Arts and Culture Committee to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Spall,
Here.
Councilmember Clifford, Councilmember Patterson.
Here.
Vice President McFadden.
Here.
President Scott.
Introductory number 347, bond ordinance of the City of Rochester, New York, authorizing the issuance of $250,000 bonds of said city to finance a portion of the costs of the Rundell Library Structural Terrace Improvement Phase 4. Before I call for the vote, I just have to acknowledge Bree and Patty, who are in the audience, who were amazing. I had the great honor to walk through this entire process as they made their selections. It was well done. It was organized. It was well attended. The finalists who came in were all prepared, and Mayor Warren, you have a heck of a team in that library. And then the DES folks, I see Norma's there, his team was there, Holly was there, lots of people supporting this project. So I think the choice was unanimous almost, and a really, really exciting opportunity. So are there any other questions or comments before we take a vote? Can I have a motion and a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I say aye. Motion passed. Thank you.
That concludes the business of the committee. We will have a public hearing at 5 o'clock. We have one item for the hearing. I got 459. No. Okay. Okay, good evening. The meeting will come to order, and the clerk will call the roll for this public hearing.
Councilmember Clifford, Councilmember Evans, Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Lightfoot,
Present.
Councilmember Ortiz, Councilmember Patterson, Councilmember Spall,
Here.
Vice President McFadden, President Scott.
Here.
Oh, it's still my turn, right?
Yes.
Pursuant to law, a public hearing will now be had on the following matter: authorizing and approving the sale of real estate and endorsing a qualified developer for the 52 Broadway Development Project, introductory number URA 6. Any persons desiring to speak in reference to said matter will now be heard.
There being no speakers, that hearing is closed. Meeting is adjourned. So, all of you, my colleagues, I'm sure you're aware of the passing of Minister Evans, and his wake begins now, I believe.
5 to 8.
Okay.
Enid
At
Baptist.
Enon. The funeral service is tomorrow morning at 11.